Okay, so I know that I've said that gravity is 9.8. And that's relatively true for our class. That's really all we need to worry about. But in actual universe, real world physics, Einstein discovered his theory of relativity, which basically has this premise that what gravity actually is a warping of space-time. Now, you're probably wondering, what the heck is space-time? Well, everything in our universe lies on a flat plane of space and time. So, if there was no such thing as a warping of space-time, you would see objects traveling in a perfectly straight line forever and ever. But we know that planets kind of orbit each other, right? So what actually happens is gravity is the warping of space-time. So if I were to put something massive in the center of this sheet of space-time, then I can actually see objects rotating around it. So, you see it is no longer going in a perfectly straight line. Instead, it is traveling in an orbit, a circular motion. So you can kind of see right here that these objects, while I'm throwing it in a straight line, they start orbiting, rotating around this massive object in the center. That's how orbiting works. Again, to prove it, without that object, they just go straight forever. But that's not the case, right? What I can show instead that's also a really cool effect is, let's say we have a large object like this metal ball and a still large but slightly smaller object. What you can see is that these objects can kind of rotate around each other as they spiral inward. I'm a little nervous because this is glass, so I'm a little it's not mine. Sorry, Ashmore, if this breaks, I owe you. So, you can kind of see that instead of orbiting separately, if they stay close to one another, this larger object actually keeps the small yellow metal ball from leaving its orbit. An example of that would be the Earth-Moon system, or you can think of it like the sun. Or we can think of this object in the center as the sun, and this as the Earth and the Moon. And look at that. They're kind of orbiting around each other forever. So lovely. Now you might be asking yourself, why is it that we aren't spiraling into the sun if these objects are? Well, to be quite honest, as great as this demonstration is, this fabric right here has a little bit of friction in it. So when these objects are going around in circles, they're actually losing a little bit of energy due to friction. So that friction is causing a loss of energy, which causes them to orbit at a slower rate and eventually fall into the center. In space, with the giant vacuum, there's pretty limited frictional loss, which is why we're able to orbit pretty much indefinitely. One thing that's really cool that actually happened in the beginning of space, all sorts of objects were twisting and turning around each other in different directions. Eventually, objects that weren't going in the same direction were eliminated through collisions. So, you can see that all of the objects that were traveling in the other direction got eliminated, while the remaining objects are able to spin around in the same direction. That's why all of the planets orbit in the same way, and why we orbit around the galaxy in the same exact way. Objects that didn't orbit in that direction were destroyed. One last thing that I want to try to show you is what happens when we have two large objects at two separate points in a system. So 1 second. When two massive objects are at different points, you can cause objects to orbit in a figure-8 pattern, if I am able to do this correctly. And what you're noticing is that sometimes my path is a little off, a little bad, and you're seeing them just fall inward. That's actually what's happening to us. Oh my god, I did it! Ah! We did it! Hey! Okay, cool. That's what's actually happening to us, and what's keeping us from falling off of the Earth is we're being sucked down by Earth's gravity as it is warping space-time and keeping us locked down on the ground. And you can notice if you travel fast enough, you can escape the gravitational pull of one force and eventually get sucked into another one. So, that's the concept behind planets, the moon, large objects, and gravity in general, and why rockets are able to escape.